Good afternoon, and welcome back to another segment of Expansion of Consciousness. I'm your host, Jason Medlock. We have a fabulous guest, a author, a gallery owner, just a uniquely intuitive individual, Mrs. Dana Sardano. And the interesting thing about this is we know that we all have these different lives that we're living while we're incarnated here on earth. But there is a reality to the construct that we're living in. So we have people who are progressives in business, who are living their lives to the fullest, but they all use some sort of intuitive ability. And Dana is here to talk to us about that. Dana is the owner, resident artist, and intuitive at Ubuntu Fish Gallery in Stuart, Florida. A published author, co-founder of Phenom Publishing, and a co-founder and chief officer of Curriculum+Content at finduniquelyu.com. After picking up a paintbrush for the first time in 2015 since her childhood, in June 2017, she decided to retire from a 23-year career in education in order to fully embrace an artist's life and to model her daughter the importance of listening to your soul's purpose, your bliss, and a number of other things. Dana spent 2 years honing in her craft as well as developing her intuition and opened Ubuntu Fish Gallery in September 2019. 2 years after, she took her leap of faith from her traditional education, experiencing for herself and offering for others more creative and spiritual form of personal growth and development at Ubuntu Fish Gallery. Dana has never felt more alive and has made it her mission to help others do the same. During Dana's time as owner, resident, and artist, and intuitive at Ubuntu Fish Gallery, she figured out how to merge her greatest strengths, her intuition, her leadership skills, her educational experiences, and her artistic ability, and currently guides people to lead more empowered lives through their intuitive guidance sessions, private groups, and authored books. The 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments. That's a topic. I'm sorry, that's the title of Dana's book. And I was like, wow, that's a super title. But it's for personal empowerment. Beyond the 10, Decoding the Woo, and Vita finds her own crown on that very subject matter. So Dana's also an accomplished author. And Dana's recently partnered up with Angela DeMarco to create Phenom Publishing and finduniquelyu.com. We mentioned that earlier, but what a multi-faceted, multi-talented, intuitive author, owner of a publishing company. Without any further ado, I'm going to bring in Miss Dana Sardano. Dana, I have lit your profile up. How do you feel about that?
It's so weird hearing it from somebody else's mouth, you know? Just the other day, I had somebody, well, it doesn't matter, but it was about some sort of award, and they were interviewing me and they were asking me all these questions. And I was hearing the things that I do out of my own mouth. And I was like, holy crap, when you do what you love, you're not even paying attention. And then when you go back and you look at it, you're like, wow, man, we're getting stuff done around here.
Getting stuff done. And we could this is typical. We could say, well, tell us how you started, and we're all off into a lot of different things, but let's get to it because there are a lot of different topics that you can talk about. Give us a little bit though on the way you moved in this direction.
There is a lot. When I was watching your intro,
Uh-huh.
not your intro, the prior, what's
Sure,
it called?
sure. The show intro.
Yeah, the show intro.
Uh-huh.
I was like, oh, we could talk about that. We could talk, like, I could talk
Yeah.
about all of it, but I'm going to do my best, and you may have to reel me in. I'm going to do my best to focus. But how is a 25-year veteran educator? And I didn't teach art. I taught English and history. I was a director of student development. suspended kids and made sure kids who needed accommodations got accommodations. Like I did nothing like I'm doing now. So the question is, how am I sitting here doing all these things?
Exactly.
I'll be honest. I cleared out without even realizing I was not on an intentional spiritual journey by any means, but naturally, because I was tired of living a life that was unfulfilling, I started cutting out the crap, cutting out the excess, ending toxic relationships little by little, not even realize, just knowing they made me unhappy and they couldn't exist anymore.
Sure.
And the more I did that, the more opportunities that served me came my way. And I had an opportunity one Friday night to go with one of those painting with a twist classes. You know what I mean? Like we paint, you drink wine with a bunch of ladies and like you paint a palm tree. I don't know if you've ever heard anything like this, but I asked my husband if he wanted to go. This was in 2015, and he laughed at me and was like, no, I'm not hanging out with a bunch of women drinking wine. But he's like, I'll take you to Michael's. I'll buy you anything you want, and we'll go. And so we did that. We went home at the dining room table. I was like, I'm going to paint you an elephant. And that was January 2015. I painted him this elephant, and he was like, oh my God, I think you're good. I'm like, oh my God, I think so too. And something awoke inside of me. And I've been following my nudges and my creativity ever since. And it's just brought me from thing to thing, art festival, to leaving my job, to getting paid, to do paintings, not necessarily in that order, to meeting really cool and fabulous people like mediums and Reiki healers, to my own tuition opening up, to me, meeting with an old college friend and creating this educational platform and this publishing company, being in the gallery. Like I'm just spitting all this stuff at you, but like yes. I just said yes to my creativity, and here we are.
So obviously you achieved a level of joy, a level of peace and freedom once you made that decision.
Yep.
How'd you do that?
How did I do that?
Yes. What did you use? What modality, or what's your secret to achieving that level of peace, joy, and freedom? Because you were, like you said, a career educator.
Yeah.
And you shifted so quickly. We're going to get into all the other things, but how were you able to move yourself out from that space? What did you do?
I learned a lot. I'm a trial and error person. Like yes. I'm not like, oh, let's read this book, or meanwhile I'm writing books like nobody's business, but yet I won't read. That's for a different conversation. But I'm trial and error. And what I learned through all of this, I could give you all these different modalities, but I learned a very valuable thing. I actually wrote about it, that we are all born with an emotional guidance system and a physical guidance system. Like our senses are allowing us to decide what's good for us and what's not, what serves us and what doesn't. So I started to realize that when things feel good, this is so simple, and you're probably going to make fun of me. When things feel good, we should do more of that. And when things feel icky, we should do less of that. And our emotions are telling us what direction to go in. And when I started doing more things that felt good and really beginning to recognize the icky stuff, the why it was icky, because then it goes back to childhood trauma. It even goes back to past life trauma. It goes back to these things, and readjusting my conditioning and my belief system and my behavioral patterns, then I could do more things that feel good. That's really general, but that's really the core of it.
Right. And it's the core of anyone who is able to move themselves from let's say, from doing something that they've been doing for so long, which is habit forming. You have to dig deep and move into an area of your life, of your psyche, to unlearn things, to create new habits, to uncover pain, to then bring it forth and to commit to healing, to move forward. So I know that a lot of things I just said, I know you're like, you know what, we can dive into that right now. But you went from a teacher to an artist gallery owner, to an author, to a co-founder of a publishing company. We know that, it's an incredible story. And like you said, there were some things that happened in my past. But how did you turn whatever dysfunction you were dealing with in your background into a personal success story?
Nothing happens overnight. It all
Yes.
happens in layers, right? So I think, in the spiritual community, people throw terms around like, dark night of the soul and stuff like that. And the reality is when our life experiences become so uncomfortable that we have to make a change, that's the dark night of the soul. But it doesn't have to be like, I'm 400 pounds and I'm smoking every day and I'm, doing drugs and living a miserable life. And then tomorrow I'm going to go run the marathon. I'm going to be better. It doesn't work that way. It works like you show up for yourself one day and say, you know what? I'm not going to put up with this anymore, whatever this may be.
Setting intentions.
But, a lot of people think, and this is, I keep referring to the books, but the follow-up to 10 Recommandments is Decoding the Woo-Woo. And it's about my irritation about some of the spiritual terminologies or, what people think they understand and they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, you set an intention. So you decide, right? So first thing you do, you decide, I am going to be in a happy, healthy relationship.
Right.
But a lot of people stop there and they'll say, oh, I want my perfect significant other to look like X, Y, and Z. And they stop there. But people forget sometimes, ooh, look at that.
Yeah. You started talking about it early. And I said, you know what? Let me go ahead and put this on. Beyond the 10, Decoding the Woo-Woo.
Yep.
And you were just saying.
Yeah. But there's action. There's action. People also talk about, like attracts like, or the law of attraction. You have to feel love to be loved, but there's another step to that. You have to do things in your own life. It's action to create that feeling of love. Can I give you just an example? Because
Absolutely. No,
broadly.
absolutely. That's why you're here. I want you here. I want you talking.
Okay. Oh my God. You're like the the man of my dreams.
Yes.
Just talk to me, Dana. Just keep talking. Okay. So I'll just give you an example. So
Yes.
I'm going to be 52 in June. So in my entire 30s, I was single. And now, from early 30s to late 30s, my friends were getting married and doing their thing. And I couldn't figure out, I thought I had a lot to offer. I followed all the rules. I went to school, I got a degree, I got a good job, I lived in a good place. I did all those things. I try to keep myself relatively attractive. I worked out, I did all these things. And I'm like, why can't I meet a decent guy? And what I was noticing was all I wanted was just to be in a relationship, a loving relationship, with peace and where we got along, you know what I mean? Yeah. And have a home and have children and have all, that's all I wanted. But instead I was meeting what I thought at the time was jerk after jerk after jerk. But the reality was I was meeting guys that were aligned with my dysfunction, aligned with my poor self-image, aligned with all that. And I was just meeting one after another. So this is an example of how I think the law of attraction works. All I wanted was unconditional love. All I wanted was a home, and all I wanted was just to be at peace. So I'm going out with jerk after jerk after jerk. So somewhere in my mid to late 30s, I lived in a condo by the beach that I wasn't allowed to have animals. And I got a Shih Tzu. Her name was Mia. Mm-hmm. And I got her and I snuck her in my condo for about a year. I'm making the story way too long. The long and the short is I got the letter that I couldn't have the dog there. And I had a choice to give up the dog or to do something about it and keep the dog. So I wound up selling my condo, buying a house in the same neighborhood because I love the neighborhood, mm-hmm. and creating a home for me and Princess Mia. So in that time, not even realizing what I was doing, I shifted from the loneliness and desperation of why can't I meet a decent guy? And I shifted to landscaping and curtain shopping and painting and creating this home for me and my dog. And I wound up, that was the spring of 2008. By August 2009, I had my first daughter. By January 2011, I had my second daughter. And I'm with my husband came after, just to be clear. Judge me as you will. But my husband came shortly after. And I'm living like really, literally, no exaggeration, like are living happily ever after. And what I understood at the time, and even more so in retrospect, because that's always the beautiful lens to look through, was when I shifted from why can't I meet fill in the blank? Why is every guy fill in the blank? And focused on what I wanted without even realizing, creating this beautiful home, having a love affair with this animal, this unconditional love. I bought a house for my dog, essentially. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
but not even realizing that, just following my heart and doing and then all of a sudden, everything I wanted, it came in layers because I had a little sorted situation, with the children and the birth father before I met my husband. Like, I'm not going to leave that out. I mean, I am going to leave it out, but I'm not going to pretend like that didn't exist. But
Right.
eventually, step by step by step, I wound up where I wanted just by shifting my attention to what I wanted in the present.
And thoughts are very, very powerful.
Yeah.
And we if we think bad things, we get bad things. If we think good things, we get good things. If we think in between, we get in between. But one thing, when you talk about the law of attraction, that I like to tell people to also do is that it's almost like a repeatable process. Once your subconscious mind really understands that this is something that you want to make a change, then it'll go along with it. But it must be believable. But here's another step, Dana, that people that they either don't know or they forget to do. We are free will beings. We got that from source, from God. And whenever we need help from our spirit guides,
Oh, here
from
we
source
go.
himself, you have to give permission to intervene in my life, because we are free will beings. So giving permission for spirit guide, for your guardian angel, for whomever to intervene in your life, some people have to remember that as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I think about all these cliches, especially stuff that comes from the Bible.
Yes.
And you always hear God helps those who help themselves, right? And
Yeah.
I don't consider myself, a religious person, just because of I just don't.
Right.
We'll just leave it at that. But the reality is, call it what you want. Call it aspects of your own soul, call it energy, call it your spirit guides, call it God. I don't care. Call it the angels. I don't care what you call it. The reality is, until you make an attempt to help yourself, and that goes with the take action, until you're doing things to help yourself, you're not necessarily going to get the assistance that you're looking for. And you also, like you said, you have to give permission. You have to ask. It comes cryptically. It comes symbolically. You have to really be in tune with yourself and recognize that the power is always within you. Nobody's helping you. You're just getting assistance to do what I keep doing this because you have to be aligned. This is my alignment gesture. I'll be doing that a lot. You know what I mean? But you have to stand up. You have to show up for yourself. The moment you show up for yourself, all sorts of stuff shows up for you.
You just talked about encrypted messages, and that just totally made me smile, because as a professional associate remote viewer, I've been doing that for a number of years. The only way I was able to discern from different pieces of information I was getting was to know the difference between my conscious mind and my subconscious mind. So when you say the messages come in encrypted, they actually really do.
Yeah.
But using meditation, using any kind of modality, that even hypnosis, that can move you into the theta state and move you into an area of your thought process where there's just total peace and quiet. There you can decipher between the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the messages. You can't do it overnight, Dana, but if people would learn to calm themselves and meditate for a period of time, you can absolutely discern these messages that you get that start off being encrypted.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to comment on the whole meditation thing, because I'm very much, mover and a shaker. And I had to nearly be like held down to start meditating. Like, Dana, you need to meditate. I'm like, yeah, I'll get to that. It's on my list, right? You need to meditate. But what I didn't realize was I was intimidated by the idea of meditation, because for those of us who are in really in the yoga, the real full on spiritual community, because I kind of like have a foot in both worlds. It's intimidating. You're like, I can't clear my mind. And how do I sit still? And what is this own thing? And what do I do with my hands? And there's all of that. But the reality is meditation, it's not about clearing out everything in the mind. It's just about having moments of peace where you're not, again, looking outward. I realized in retrospect, I used to run every morning. There's a form of meditation there. I used, when I cook.
And hypnosis.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to talk to you about the hypnosis in a second because I know your credentials as well, and I want to talk about that. Look at me taking over. But just anything.
Well, just interview me then. Come on, I'm ready.
But anything that you're doing that keeps you in the moment and keeps you focused on the now is a form of meditation. So I finally graduated from the painting as meditation, the gardening as meditation, the running as meditation. And then finally I got, I look up at, I call them them, but really it's aspects of me. It was like, you need to just go sit outside in nature. And so it's like, all right, nobody's telling me to meditate. Nobody's telling me to do Om. Nobody's telling me to, force thoughts out of my mind. So I just sat outside and stared at the trees for 10 minutes. Sometimes I closed my eyes. Sometimes I opened my eyes. And wherever the thoughts came, I just kind of let them come and go. And then it turned into 20 minutes. Then it turned into closing my eyes. Then it turned into meditation. So that fear, that intimidation that a lot of people have, it's just about being still and undistracted for 10 plus minutes of your life. That's all it is.
And on a more pointed focus, you speak about a lot of different things, about breaking the cycles of abuse and, neglect for your children. You want to talk about that a little bit?
I always knew growing up that I was going to make a concerted effort to break the cycle. Like I understood that I came from, a bit of, their traumas. Many of us, especially around this age, like there's traumas all around. And I knew that no matter what, I was going to break that cycle. My children were going to be seen, they were going to be heard, they were going to be loved, they weren't going to feel like burdens, all of that stuff. They weren't going to be physically abused, neglected, any of that. And when I had both my children within, 16 months of each other out of wedlock, and I don't want to get too much into, I say their birth father because my husband has since adopted them, but I don't want to get too much into his story because it's not mine to tell. But let's just say I was 37, I got pregnant. I knew he was a flight risk from the word go. He was about 10 years younger than me. It was like one of those weekends gone long. And here we are, 2 children later. But the children part were very intentional. Anyway. Even though it didn't look like I was breaking the cycle, because now I have these 2 children with this man that is now going to create abandonment issues as far as the way it's looking. And even though it took me a long time to get there. Let's just say it wasn't A to B. And that's the point that I'm trying to make to people. It was A, B, C, F, Q, circle around. But
wasn't easy.
No, but I always knew my children will feel loved. They will feel safe. They will feel all of these things. And like I said, when they were very, very young, again, what I suspected to be a flight risk was a flight risk in the birth father. My husband stepped in. My kids were like 2 and 3 years old and adopted them by the time that they were 5. And now they live safe and loved and all of the things that I wanted for them. So you ask how I did it. Yeah. I just did it with always knowing that this is what I was doing. Even when I was going through the legal aspects of their birth father signing them over, my lawyer, everybody around me was like, he'll never do it. He'll never do it. And I was like, mother knows. I was like, you don't understand. I know all of the players in this scenario. I know how this is going to pan out because I won't have it any other way. My children will be safe and loved, period.
And we talk about the cycles of abuse. And, there's something out there called epigenetic transfer where, we eat meat that has been slaughtered and the pain and the hurt that the animal felt, that's still in their gene expression. So when we consume it, it meshes in with our cells, and we know cells hold memory. And how do you break this this lifelong transferring of all this stuff? And I applaud you for just taking a stance and setting your intentions. You speak about also just being just being in the moment when you decided to make, your career, to leave your career and go for your passion. And as a matter of fact, you left a 6-figure career to pursue your passion. What was the catalyst? What made you just leave that? And I understand, because I did too. I was in
Nice.
very comfortable position, but it just didn't resonate with me anymore.
Yeah, and that's like what I was saying before. Like, sometimes things get to a point that you no longer resonate and you have to make a choice. Many of us choose to stay as the dissonance grows and grows and grows because fear, because it's the devil, you know. You know what I mean? That's why people stay in unhealthy relationships, because they know that, as opposed to, with what they could get into.
Yes.
For me, there was a little bit of self-sabotage. Like, I was in again education for 25 years, but the last 16 I was in the same school. So I grew up there. I started there at 30, and I did, the rest of my adult life there, or at least until I left. And I loved it. I loved the people there. I loved my job. I loved everything about it. But the one thing that it was a pattern of mine, was everything I did, I was championing the cause of the children. I was fighting for the children. It was always overcoming. It was always fighting the battles, fighting with the administration, fighting with the parents, fighting with everybody to get the children's needs met. But essentially it was to get, little Dana's needs met. Like, there was like some patterns there. And so I was there from like 30 and then to, 40, like a decade. And then I got pregnant. I started having children. And then my perspective started to change. What was important to me. I didn't want to stay late nights and be the hero. And you know what I mean? I didn't want to like do all I wanted to be home with my children. Then I got RA. I got rheumatoid arthritis. So physically the stress was shutting me down. Then I met my husband. Actually, then I got rheumatoid arthritis, but it was all like this perfect storm.
Or you were receiving messages from your colleagues in the spiritual realm. Typically when we get the message, is already manifested in some sort of disease or some sort of ailment. And by the time they've made it into an ailment or disease, we know that that's the only thing that'll get our attention in the physical realm. So obviously they've been trying to give you messages, Dana.
Of course. There's so much to unpack here. The first part is that's what I was aligned with when I started that job. And as I became more emotionally healthy, fighting for everything I wanted, I was no longer in alignment with. So then my guides, my soul, my whatever, is throwing all these things at me. And one of the things, how am I allowed to be salty at all? Like, what kind of language?
You can be whatever you need to be to get the message across to the audience.
Okay. So, all right. So get ready. Okay. So in 10 Recommandments.
And that's what I was going to ask you that next. Let me pull it up because you beat me to it. Like, what is 10 Recommandments? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so 10 Recommandments. It's like it's a marriage between like the teachery part of me, like the how-to, and the anecdotal part, like the storytelling. So basically, I use the stories of my life experience, and I use them as examples for these 10 recommandments, these 10 points, these 10 lessons, which I'll bring up in a second. But what I have learned, to your point, Jason, what I have learned is when messages are coming to us, they usually come like with a tickle of a feather. Like, hey, maybe we should do this now. Or then there's like the tap on the shoulder, and then it turns into a smack on the side of the head. And then it turns into a punch in the arm. And then the universe winds up, and this is quoted in the book, gives you a good old fashioned twat punch to ensure that you know that it's time to make a change.
Yes.
So for me, I was fighting, doing my thing. And then I had my children, and I was getting the ick, like, ooh, I don't really love this job as much as I used to. And ooh, I'm annoyed when I have to go in when I know my children are home sick, and it turned into that. And then I was starting to have I was annoyed with every situation because, again, I was fighting for the underdog. So and then a new head of school came in. The previous head of school, I was this golden child. I could do and say whatever I wanted, and I was a hero. The new guy came in. We had completely opposing philosophies. Then I get RA. So the stress is shutting my body down. And then I started painting. And so finally the painting is what pushed me over the edge. Like that's when I was like, I didn't see all those signs. I didn't see all the you know what punches. I just knew when I started painting, there was nothing else I could do with my life. I could no longer do that when I knew I could do this.
So Dana, what is Vita Finds Her Crown all about?
So Veda Finds Her Crown is it's about it's it was intended to be a children's story.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, because it's like, you know, when you go to a Disney movie, like with a kid and like you're there for the kid, but yet, you know, all the songs and like you get the messages and like you love it. So it's like that. So it's for anybody between the ages of 8 and 88. And it's a twofold. It's a little story about Veda, who is the third eye chakra.
Okay.
Right. Yes. And how she loses her crown, the crown chakra, and she goes on this little excursion to find her crown. And in doing so, it's like very Wizard of Oz. She meets up with Pravda, who's the throat chakra, and Amma, who's the heart chakra, and so on and so forth. And you get to see through the characterization of these little people, you get to see what a misaligned chakra looks like. So obviously the characters, they're paired up with the color of the chakra. And then at the end, Veda finds a crown, and you learn a lot about the chakras through the story. The second half of the book is a workbook, because the thing about chakras or your energy centers, you know, again, it's very intimidating, like the meditation. You know what I mean? People who don't understand what it, you know, really is just about stillness. With chakras, people don't understand. It's just part of our energy centers, and it's a part of our, you can liken it to Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the stages of development. Just as an example, your root chakra, the greatest age of resonance is between 0 and 7 years old. So if you have a trauma that happened, or anything that happened that created an imbalance, you carry that through your whole life, and your other chakra development builds on it, and you don't even know. So the workbook is all open-ended questions. It's not about crystals, and it's not about, you know, I would say like dancing in the moonlight, you know, with a full moon ritual. It's truly about understanding what caused these imbalances, reconciling these imbalances, and then realigning your chakras. So you have the workbook and you have the book. And I actually teach workshops on all of my books on finduniquelyu.com for people who are open to creating a better life for themselves and need a little bit of guidance. So you buy my book like a textbook. I teach the workshop, and everybody's happy and well.
I love talking about chakras. When the meridians and when those energy wheels don't turn, they don't spin, because chakras and our meridians are energy wheels at different parts in our body. Mm-hmm. And the fact that when you have blockage, or when you have a chakra that's out of alignment, energy in your body is out of alignment, what do you have? Mood swings, you're feeling bad, things are not going your way. And I love working with the Reiki masters, because they can use the pendulum, and they can pinpoint which one of those meridians is not turning. The energy wheels in the chakra. And when they can find it, and that's when they use their hands to move the energy through their bodies to make the energy wheel turn again within that chakra. So it's always fascinating to see things like this. And for kids, for you to have something for age group, that's awesome. I really love that.
It's all about the kids. It's all about, because we have to reconcile our imbalances from, you know, years of, you know, getting banged around, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like through life experiences. But these kids are coming up. My kids are 12 and 13 years old. They're coming out of the gate knowing this stuff. Mm-hmm. So I always joked when I was younger, like, oh my God, if I wasn't raised by wolves, I'd be sitting in the Oval Office right now. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But the reality is, they're not digging themselves. These kids aren't digging themselves out of the hole. If we could teach them now how to reconcile their imbalances. So you're talking about the energy of it. You're talking about, you know, obviously the chakra, the wheel of energy. There are ways through Reiki masters to reconcile the imbalance there. But these imbalances, it's mental, it's emotional also. So just as an example, like my sacral chakra, okay, the age of resonance is like 8 to like 14. When I was 12, my parents got divorced. When I was 14, I ran away from home. All of that went down and it wasn't reconciled. So now I go into the development of the solar plexus, which is about my confidence and my identity, right? And that's 14 to 21. But I haven't fixed, my foundation is faulty. So my confidence level and my sense of identity, just to give you a specific, as I'm talking in too many generalities. If I am 14 years old and I believe that I can't trust the adults in my life and that the people who are supposed to love me don't properly love me, or I don't know what that love looks like, and that's my belief system. When I go into my identity or into the years of the solar plexus from 14 to 21, and that's my belief system, all of my behaviors and patterns are going to be built around that belief system. So if we teach
or
kids,
that software.
What's that?
I said, or that software, belief system software. That's all we are. Our subconscious mind.
Yes. I wasn't picking up what you're, but totally.
Yeah.
It's like there's viruses and stuff.
Yes.
So when we reconcile, like when we teach an 8-year-old to ask themselves the question, how am I feeling? Do I feel good about my body? Do I like to go outside and play? Do I do new things and have positive relationships with the people around me? If not, well, why? And when we teach them to ask themselves these questions and then to reconcile the imbalance, oh my God, then the next chakra development, they get a little bit older, it builds on that, and it builds on that. And then we have healthy, thriving adults who aren't fighting with each other on social media. It's a beautiful world.
Dana Sardano, intuitive, Ubuntu Art Gallery. What is Ubuntu and how did it change your life?
Oh my God, you're asking all the best questions.
Thank you.
So I'll tell you, Ubuntu is an African word, and the direct translation is I am because we are. I've read in places I am because you are. I prefer I am because we are. Can I share with you how I stumbled across the term?
Absolutely.
So my kids were young. Maybe they were like 1 and 2. So going back about 10 years before I was even painting. I stumbled across a story, probably on social media, about an anthropologist who was studying a tribe in Africa. And when he was waiting for his transportation to pick him up to come back to the States, he was hanging out with some kids of the village. So he's like, you know what, guys, to pass the time, let's play a little game. So he had some candy that he had bought in the city. He goes, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put this candy right by the tree, and I want you guys to line up. And on the count of 3, you guys are going to race. And whoever gets to the candy first wins. So the kids are like, yay, they get all excited, they line up, right? So he's like, 1, 2, 3. And on 3, they all link arms and they all run to the tree together.
Oh, wow.
And so, the anthropologist is like dumbfounded. So he goes over to the tree and all the kids are like, yay, and they're eating and they're sharing, whatever. And he goes to one of these girls and he's like, why would you do that? It's like, if you're going to have the candy yourself, why would you share? And she looks at him and she says, Ubuntu. I am because we are. I can't be happy unless we're all happy. And I was like, holy shit. I was like, this is beautiful. And I had these little kids and I was like, everything in my life, I changed everything. My kids will be raised into the concept of the Ubuntu, my business relationships. I forged my friendships, my relationship with my husband. Everything is about this concept of, yes, the self is important. My needs matter. But if I have to step on somebody else's needs for my needs to matter, then what's the point?
Absolutely.
And so when I started painting, it had to be Ubuntu art. It brought me joy to create it. If it brings you joy to look at it, Ubuntu. And everything else has been Ubuntu ever since.
We're running out of time, but but there's so many different books you've written on. There's so many different topics that we could talk about. I want you to come back because the audience wants you to come back. I know they do. But can you leave us with something, tips, anything that has helped you or can help others, and tell people how to find you and what you can do to help them?
Okay. So So firstly, the best place to find me, because I'm all over the place, because like I said, I have a lot of irons in the fire, is Ubuntu Fish Gallery.
Okay.
There you can find, you can find the books. You can find books that I've published, because they're all that similar sort of, hey, let's make the world a better place genre. I don't know if they're calling it that yet, but that's what I want to call it. But you could find the Phenom Publishing there. You could find where I do the workshops on finduniquelyu.com. You can find the services and the private groups that I do in the gallery. It's all there. But the pearl of wisdom, or the pearls that I want to share, is in 10 recommendments for personal empowerment. There are 10. There are 10 recommendments, and they all start with like, I shall not, whatever it is, and then rather I shall. And I think the most important are the first recommendment and the 10th. The first recommendment is I shall not claim victimhood. And then it goes into, rather I shall, take responsibility and all these things. But that's really, really important. When we hear the word victim, we tend to think of like the stereotypical victim. But if we feel like we're losing in any situation, like we're getting the short end of the stick in any situation, then we have fallen into victimization. And the reality is we have control over all of our circumstances. We just have to be able to look at them in an unbiased way, look at them as information, and then go from there. So that is the first. The last is I shall not live in fear, and then rather I shall understand the fear and love. And if we recognize that fear is on one end of the spectrum with all of the yucky emotions that don't feel good, and love is on the other with all the peace and freedom and joy and contentment, and we do our best to have experiences or to create experiences that fall there, then, and when we do feel icky, to recognize that it really just comes from fear, I mean, we're halfway there. So
amazing. Dana Sardano, ladies and gentlemen, how she dropped her 9-to-5er and now lives a successful life as a creative entrepreneur. We're going to hear from her again. Dana, I'm going to move you to the back office. Do not go anywhere. I want to talk to you for a few more moments, and I'm going to close this thing out.
Jason, thank you.
No
Bye,
problem.
everybody.
Stay there. Successful, and creative. We're talking about a woman who spent several years as an educator, but followed her intuition, followed steps that led her to create Ubuntu, a lovely creative gallery where she sells books, paintings, and even let Dana tell it, where the intuitives hang out. But again, we want to thank Dana Sardano for coming and sharing her beautiful story with us. And you guys reach out to her, www.ubuntufishgallery.com, www.ubuntufishgallery.com. And you know how to find us. Go to YouTube and watch us live at Expansion of Consciousness. Subscribe and click like. That's the only thing that keeps our channel going. But until next time, we really appreciate you. We're glad that you continue to listen to our topics and listen to the wonderful and insightful people that come on. And remember, it's about consciousness and how consciousness intertwines in your everyday life, and how we're able to use different aspects of consciousness and the modalities that are afforded to us to improve our lives. That's right. And that's why you have to enlist a person like Dana to move you into the same vibration of leaving your 9-to-5 and creating a successful life as an entrepreneur. Thank you very much. And we'll see you the next time.